Hey, y'all, welcome back to the podcast solo episode today. And if you're watching this over on YouTube, yes, I am dressed as a puffy snowman because it is the 1 week of cold weather here in Arkansas and it is cold as shit. It is currently 8 degrees Fahrenheit, which for us feels like minus a billion. But hopefully by the time that you hear this, and I think we'll put this out in February, it'll be warm as shit and it'll be amazing and it'll be all as good. And this will just be a figment of your imagination because it is just cold across the whole United States right now. But this podcast is not about the cold. This podcast is something that I have wanted to record for a very, very long time. I actually did a live on this and I promised you guys I was going to do a podcast on it because I was so passionate about it. And it was actually spurred from numerous conversations, to be honest with you, on discovery calls with potential clients, with current clients, and from a podcast that I was listening to. And it just gave me this like one spur of idea. Do you guys ever listen to podcasts and you just like take one little thing that the person said? Who knows? Maybe it's something that I say today or something that someone else has said. And it just makes you go on this like runway of like, yes, this is the thing. And then you kind of figure out, your own stories and thoughts and all of the things on it. Well, today I was listening to it. I wasn't listening to the podcast today. I was listening to the podcast last week, but I've probably listened to snippets of it a few times just to try to like really articulate what the person was saying in the podcast. But I was listening to it last week and the guest on the podcast was Ryan Serhant. So I would love Ryan Serhant on this podcast. And maybe one day in the future, who knows how it's going to magically woo-woo happen. Maybe one of my connections will connect us together. But if you guys don't know who Ryan Serhant is, he became famous on Bravo television show Million Dollar Listing. And now he's just like, he is like a thing. He is turned into this massive, massive thing. He has his own real estate brokerage. He is on every television show you can possibly imagine. He's still on Million Dollar Listing. He has so many books. He has courses. He has all the things. I do believe he is like literally one of the best salespeople. His book called Sell It Like Serhant is probably one of my favorite sales books. And it is like very simple, what I believe is like the power of human connection when it comes to sales and really actually listening to people. It's a great book. I should probably actually read it again. Like, I just think it's such a good book. So if you don't have it, go get it. If you're into sales at all, I feel like everyone has some sort of sales position in their life. I just think that this world, we're always selling, we're always marketing, we're always connecting, right? It's just like a skill that everyone I think should have. Whether you're, selling for yourself or selling for someone else, I just think everyone needs to know how to sell because I think everyone is always selling themselves in some regard. But this podcast isn't about sales. This podcast is about betting on yourself and the short-term mindset that so many people have. Now, I understand that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are really listening to this to, build their own self-confidence, build their own businesses, decide it's their turn for something in their life. But I think one of the things that really harms a lot of people, and obviously one of the things that I help people with, is building their mindset, building their self-confidence. But one of the things that holds so many people back is that short-term mindset. So many, and what I'm going to explain kind of what I mean. And I did a live on it and I was so passionate about it. You guys know me, my podcasts, my lives, my reels, I'm usually pretty intense. I was actually told the other day by a it wasn't the very kindest comment for sure. And I obviously understand that I am in the position where I get to take all of the positive comments, but I also have to just be here for the negative comments as well. And this person said she wasn't trying to be mean, but she said that I was arrogant and ignorant. So I hope that you don't feel like I'm arrogant and ignorant, but if you do, I apologize. And let me just say, I'm not defending myself. I am who I am. I'm very, 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 very confident in who I am and what I believe and what I'm trying to do. What I am trying to do here is not be arrogant and not be, ignorant to the fact that like I'm fucking far from perfect. I think if you've listened to the 200 so podcasts that we've put out, you'll probably know. Maybe it's not quite 200 yet, but close enough, right? You will know that I'm the first person to say that I don't always get it right. I am the first person to say when I am wrong. So if I ever have been arrogant or ignorant, I apologize. That is not my vibe. But my vibe is very intense, very confident because I am so passionate about what I do. And that's the reason why I'm here. This is the reason why I do this podcast all the time, is to really help you decide it's your turn and to help give you that little tiny nugget that you can hopefully take to fulfill your God-given purpose, to be as confident and perhaps arrogant, ignorant sometimes as I come across. But all of that to be said, I'm so passionate about this. And what I want to talk about is this short-term mindset, because I think a lot of people don't understand that they are thinking so short-term and hurting themselves in the long run. And when I was listening to this podcast, one of the things that Ryan Serhant kept saying was his willingness to bet on himself. And he used an unbelievable example, and I'm going to explain the example here in a second. But willing to bet on themselves. That is a characteristic of an extremely confident person. I will tell you, I am that person. I'm going to give you the Ryan Serhant example of what he talked about on the podcast that I was listening to. And by the way, if you want this podcast, I actually sent this to my inspiration. I have a text message community that a few of you are in. I send you my podcast each week, but I also am now once a week sending an inspirational nugget or quote or podcast. And I actually sent this podcast that Ryan Serhant was on. I sent it to my inspiration text list. So if you're not on that text list, all you have to do is text me the word INSPO, INSPO, to 501-222-3362. And that's in the show notes. Be sure to text me and I will send you, just ask me specifically for this podcast that Ryan Serhant was on, and I'm happy to share it. But he was talking about that short-term mindset that a lot of people have for their unwillingness to bet on themselves. And this is one of the reasons why I think confidence is so key. Like confidence and the willingness to bet on yourself, oh my God, they go so hand in hand, right? But he was talking about the interviewer. And this is embarrassing to say, but like I promise you, I really, really like her. She is so she is very polarizing. You either fucking love her or you fucking hate her. And I love her. Her name is Bethany Frankel. She was a housewife. And a lot of people love her. A lot of people hate her. I really like her. I love her for her business sense. I love her for her confidence. I love her for her like no take all bullshit. I just fucking love it so much. Very similar, I guess, to my vibe. But anyway, I love her for her business. I am going to throw this, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm throwing this blanket down on the ground because, oh my gosh, with my puffer vest and my heat turned up to 75 degrees, I'm going to be like having a hot flash on this podcast if you're watching over on YouTube. But all of that to be said, I was so distracted by my 86-year-old neighbor, Joyce. If you guys have listened to this podcast or followed me over on Instagram at Christina, you know that my favorite human on the planet is Joyce, and she's outside, and it's too cold, for her to be outside. And if it's at all slippery, she should be inside. What are we doing over here, Joyce? But all of that to be said, going back, Bethany Frankel podcast, Ryan Serhant was her guest. She asked Ryan Serhant about betting on himself and does he spend over his means? And he said he's always willing to bet on the future version of himself. And that's obviously why this podcast was spurred for me, because I was like, oh my God, yes, this is what I want for my clients. This is what I want for you. I want people to have enough self-confidence in themselves to know that they can bet on themselves, to know that they can trust themselves, to show up, to get the work, to have the result, to get the work done. But he used an example of when he was young in New York. He was talking about buying an apartment, a house, whatever you want to call it in New York. His budget, I think he said, and again, don't quote me on the exact numbers right now, but it was about $1.5 million. His budget was about $1.5 million. And he said at the time, he bet on the future version of himself and ended up buying a apartment or a condo or a house or whatever. It was more than double his budget. I think he said it was like 3.2. I think his budget was like 1.5 and he bought an apartment for 3.2. And the reason why he said he did that, and a lot of people like his parents were like, oh my God, you should never do that. He was betting on the future version of himself that was going to show up to be able to live in a house that was $3.2 million. He was going to bet on that was going to be his state in 2 years from now, that he knew he was going to show up and do the work or whatever it is to be able to afford the $3.2 million house. He talked about what a lot of people don't think about. I've done calls with so many people over the years, and I have two ways to work with me. One is definitely a higher price point. One is a lower price point. And there is certain people that will always pick the lower price point. And when I talk them through about why they're paying for, or why they're betting on that lower price point, if they do actually have the money, and most people, if they want something bad enough, can be resourceful. And that's what Ryan Serhant did. He knew that he wanted to bet on himself, and he knew that in a year, that 1-bedroom apartment that he was going to get for $1.5 million was not going to be the right fit for him. He knew that he was going to outgrow it. He knew that he would have to pay realtor fees. Maybe he wouldn't have to, but he would have to pay the seller fee. He would have to move all his shit out. He'd have to find another one in a year. He knew the future version of himself was going to show up to that $3.2 million apartment. He had enough wherewithal to bet on himself. And so many people short-side themselves. They have this short-term thinking, and you're not thinking about the future version of yourself. And that's why confidence is so important. That's why someone has to know that they can trust themselves to do what it takes to be the version of yourself in the future that is able to afford a $3.2 million house. And he knew that he was betting on himself. And one of the things that a recurring theme in this podcast was his willingness to bet on himself. And obviously he has been able to gain the confidence. He talked about during the pandemic in 2020, he launched Serhant, which is his brokerage firm. Now, I don't know a ton about what it actually costs to own a brokerage firm, but he talked about basically every dollar he had ever made, he gambled, he bet on opening that brokerage firm. And now it is paid off tenfold. They have offices all across the country, like Florida, Carolinas, all of the things. But he was willing to bet on himself. And I'm telling you, that future version of yourself is going to be so fucking proud of yourself. Even if it didn't work the way that he wanted it to work, even if it didn't work out exactly the way that he wanted it to work out, where he's definitely booming right now, but he had enough confidence in himself to say, I know I am going to hold myself to the standard. I am going to do whatever it takes to be the person who can have the brokerage firm that can have the $3.2 million house. And this is what I want for you too. Knowing that you have that confidence and knowing that you're always thinking about the long game is astronomically important. And so many people short-side themselves by thinking about the version of themselves now and not the version of themselves that they want to be at. And one of the things that I've always said is when you pay attention. And there is probably not much more of a motivator than betting on yourself at a high level and betting on the future version of yourself. Now, I'm not telling you to max out every credit card and overextend yourself and put yourself in this nervous system where you're feeling like dog shit every single day. That's not a great place to operate out of either, but there is every successful, and I love greatness. I love high performing athletes. Lately, Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Nick Saban have all retired. And all three of those guys, when former players of theirs are going back and talking about their experience working with these coaches, every single one of them say they never felt comfortable working with these coaches. They were always put in an uncomfortable situation. Well, guess what? That's one of the reasons why they were great. They were always put in this uncomfortable situation to get them to the next level, to make them show up to the highest version of themselves. I was just doing a discovery call with a guy who I'm hoping by the time this podcast comes out has decided for us to work together, because I just loved his attitude. I loved his mentality. He knows that he is right where he does not want to be. And he knows that he needs to have someone outside of himself hold him accountable to becoming great. Because, there's a time in which people just get sick of their own bullshit. I don't know if you're listening to this, but you might be at a point or getting to a point that you're just sick of yourself. And I mean this so kindly, because trust me, I've been there. A lot of my clients have been there, where you're just so fucking sick of telling yourself all of the things that you're going to do. You're so fucking sick of saying, when this happens, I'll do it, or I should be here, or next year I'll do it, or next month I'll do it. You know, the one thing that Ryan Serhant's multi-million dollars can't afford him, that Bethany Frankel, that myself and you cannot buy, is more time. And you know, I got asked a question the other day. I've had an opportunity to be able to speak with this group, and I got asked a question, and the question was, funny enough, it's right on my desk. It's like, what's the one thing that you could change for every single person in this world? And for me, it would be people quit wasting their fucking time and not literally understand that life is so short, and that the thing that they want to do in this world needs to be done. And that uncomfortable, disgusting feeling that you have inside of yourself because you keep putting it off is not okay. Like, ultimately, that's what I want for every one of my clients. I want my clients, yes, to make all the money in the world. Yes, I want all my clients to be happy as hell, but I want them so in alignment with their lives and knowing that they are actually doing the thing that they put here on this planet to do. And for some, that's making multiple millions. For others, that's being a mom. Like, it doesn't matter, but I want you to be doing that thing. And every single time you tell yourself you're not doing that thing, that hurts my soul. You guys, I've said it 100 times on this podcast. I'll say it 100 more. Like, I am so at a place in my life that I'm so fucking blessed that, like, I don't have to work as hard as I do. I don't have to do these podcasts every single week. And I do them because it is my God-given purpose. And I want you to feel that exact same way in your life. Like, whatever it is, I want you to feel that, because I know the feeling of staying stuck. I know the feeling of thinking of the short term and not thinking about your greatness and not being willing to bet on yourself. Like, I will bet on myself every single time. A personal story that I think is kind of funny. Let me grab a glass of water, because my word of the year, you guys, if you've listened to the podcast before, is breathe. And sometimes I do these podcasts and forget to fucking breathe. So, all of that to be said, personal story on betting on myself. And I've never told this story, which is so funny. I don't know if I've even told this to clients, but this was way back in my former life in the golf world. It was when I was kind of transitioning between playing golf and hosting golf events. And I had an unbelievable opportunity because I was constantly betting on myself, constantly putting myself in proximity of people who I felt at the time I had absolutely no fucking business to be around. I feel like I've constantly done this in my life. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I feel like I've been in the place that I'm at now, where, you know, I'm around these amazing humans that I always get to be around, just because I'm constantly just like putting myself probably in rooms and positions and places and emails and phone calls that I have no business being in. But I remember I had an opportunity to go and have an interview. I was brought out to Los Angeles twice. And the second time I was offered this job. And, you know, looking back, thank you, Lord, for unanswered prayers, because that was not the position for me. And my life wouldn't be anywhere close to where it is. I'd probably have a fuck you amount of more money. I'd probably have so many zeros in my bank account, but I probably wouldn't have been the person or had the life that I want. But all of that to be said, sometimes you just have to walk away from those things. But it's interesting. They asked me if when I was taking this position, or they offered me the position, they said, would you want a salary position, or would you want 100% fully commissioned position? And even though I was probably, I don't even know, let's say I was 25, 26 at the time, even though it's easy to look at a position where it would have been multiple five figures. You know, let's just say hypothetically, it would probably have been about $300,000 to $500,000. But they asked me, would you want a salary, or would you want fully commission? And even then, when I was not as confident as I am now, I fucking knew that I knew I was taking that commission. No fucking way am I putting my life and my money and my, you know, ability to earn in the hands of anyone else besides myself. I will bet on myself every fucking time. And that muscle, that thing, is a skill, you guys. You can learn that. You can help be taught that. You can help figure out why you want, quote unquote, the safety of a normal 9 to 5 rather than betting on yourself. Because a person who is willing to bet on themselves every single solitary time will probably go further, because this world, as much as you think there's so much safety in giving your authority to someone else, that's why I feel like this world that we live in right now is just so chaotic. And I try to keep my head in the sand when it comes to just everything outside of my bubble of life, is because people want someone else to give them that safety. They want someone else to give them fucking safety, which doesn't even exist. The safest thing is, number one, your faith, but number two, it's in you. You are the safety. You have the ability. And so many people are afraid of that. And I understand that. This is what I help people with. It doesn't matter if you're making $5 million or you're making $5,000. You're working for yourself or you're working for someone else. A lot of people have this fears inside of them, and it often comes from your childhood. It often comes through one little thing that happened, or maybe a multitude of things that happen that make you feel like you can't trust yourself, or make you feel, and then sometimes it goes on the exact opposite side of the pendulum, where you grew up knowing that you couldn't trust anyone else, so you take everything into your own hands. Neither one of them is actually true. For me, what I always say with my clients is, like, neither side, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see, but like, neither side of the pendulum is usually the best. The truth is in the middle. Like, yes, we have to have some outside safety, but also you can't expect that taking like a traditional, like, easy way out and giving everyone else the authority and the ability to control everything is the safest way. You have the power. You have the power to control your destiny. And when you bet on yourself, you have such a better opportunity. I will bet on myself every single fucking time. And that's what I want for you too. Like, the future version of yourself wants you to bet on yourself, And so I think too, one of the things that Ryan Serhant said in this podcast is, like, the few $100s or the few $1,000s that so many people are afraid to bet on themselves, you're not going to give two flying fucks about that money 20 years from now, 10 years from now. Like, when I tell people the difference between working with me full-time and working with me part-time, like, let's say you've been on a call with me or you've looked at my website and you're like, yes, Christina is the person I want to work with. The future version of yourself, the version of yourself that is so confident, the future version of yourself who is living in alignment with what you want to do, you're not going to think about that 10, 15, 20. I'm not even saying that that's what it costs, but like, even $500, you're not going to fucking think about that in the future. And so many people short-sighted themselves. Like, if Ryan Serhant would have been thinking about that $1 million, and yes, that's a lot of money, but if he would have been thinking about that $1 million when he bought that apartment, and not thinking about the future version of himself that, like, lives in a $3.2 million apartment, the future version of himself that's living where he actually wants to live, plus the future version of himself that lives up to the ability to pay for the $3.2 million house. He put himself in that hot water to give himself the ability to actually become the person who lives in a $3.2 million house. And oftentimes, I think so many people think so short term, like, you short side yourself. You think about the now and not the future version of yourself. The future version of yourself, let's say you spend a whole year working with me full time, and you decide in the whole next year, in the whole, 365 days that we're working together, you have unlimited access to me. That amount of money that you invest in that period of time, you will never think about that money in 1 year from now if you become the version of yourself who bets on yourself every single time. You become the version of yourself that knows you can trust yourself to show up to do whatever needs to be done. You become the version of yourself that doesn't let family, friends, coworkers, partners hold you back from living in your God-given purpose, from living in the life that you want to lead. You will never give two shits about that money. Money, if you take one thing, my assistant had told me this, and I just love that I've been able to impact her. Obviously, she doesn't pay me, I pay her. And one of the things that she has said to me over the years is, like, I have heard you on this podcast for 3 fucking years straight say There's money everywhere. Money's not hard to make. There's always more money. Go get your money. That reprogramming, and I'm not telling you, like, I personally don't have that much money. Like, I have a lot of money, but like, I don't personally have just boatloads just sitting in my office, not knowing what to do with it. But that reprogramming that I have talked on this podcast every single solitary week for 3 years, that I've been saying money's not that hard to make. Money's everywhere. Go get that money. Like, money stories are the thing that is holding you back. If you've listened to every episode of this podcast and you've never paid me a dime, never talked to me one time, I guarantee your money mindset is a lot better. And let me know if that's true. You don't ever have to talk to me again. I'm not trying to sell you. Trust me, I do not want you to work with me if you do not want to work with me. I only love working with people who are obsessed with working with me. So I will not try to sell you shit. I fucking promise. But let me know, is the fact that I have been telling you for 3 fucking years on this podcast, it's so easy to make money. There's so much money in this world. Like, money's easy to make. Money is like, when you're listening to that constantly and you're reprogramming that, if every person who's listens to this podcast, we get like, I don't even know, like 1,000 downloads a week. If you're one human who has listened to, let's just say 90% of these podcasts, and every day for the last 3 years, you have been telling yourself, money's so easy to make. Money is everywhere. My job is to go make money. Like, money is not scary. Money gives me options. Like, if you had done that for every single day for the last 3 years and you had someone hold you accountable to do that, or you just fucking wrote it on your mirror and repeated that for the last 3 years, I guarantee you there's not one person. Let me know. I will give you $100 bill if there's one person that can tell me that they've been doing that for the last 3 years, nonstop, that their money mindset isn't better. I'll give you $100 cash. Fuck, I'll give you 1,000, because it's impossible. It's impossible. Impossible. Is it impossible or impossible? Impossible. It's impossible. Impossible for you to constantly be repeating that shit and not believe that there's so much money in this world, not believe that your job is to go make money, not to believe that it's so much easier to make money than you believed 3 years ago. And that is just the constant reprogramming. I wasn't born this way. This is a skill. Everything is a skill. I think so many people, oh my gosh. And I think too, I'm having a hot flash. Oh my God, I'm having a hot flash on. Well, no wonder I have a puffer vest of, like, my heat's at 75. I mean, here we go, whatever. But and to my podcast editor, you do not have to edit that out. This is a real life podcast. I want everyone to know I'm just like sweating my ass off here. But it's true, and I want this for you. And I hate when people think short term and not long term. The future version of yourself, I promise you, will not give 2 fucks about the 10, 15, 20, 30,000. You really won't. You will not think about it. But the version of yourself that you can become in that year time or that 2-year time, it's almost like irrecognizable. Gosh, I fucked up 2 words in the last like 2 minutes. Irrecognizable, or I don't even know how to say it, but you understand what I mean. You won't even recognize yourself. You won't even know who you are. And so many people are thinking about now, and it just makes me so sad. It like makes me so sad over the years. And I'm literally like wiping sweat off my lip right now. Over the years, I have gotten on hundreds of free clarity calls, hundreds. Perhaps you've been on one with me, perhaps you haven't. My job is literally to try to give you as much clarity on that call as possible. I help you figure out like where you could be stuck mindset or strategy wise in your life or business. That is what those calls are for, completely complimentary. And then towards the end of the call, I usually tell you what the options are to work with me. I'd say 75% of people on those calls, they knew getting on that call that they wanted something different. One thing I always hear, and by the way, if you are in sales, listen to this because this is fucking gold. I use it all the time because it is true. If you get on this call, you have already decided that you want something different. Because if you didn't want something different, or if you didn't want change, you wouldn't be getting on this call. So you already thought about it. You already knew that you wanted something different. What I tell everyone, especially if someone says, I need to think about it, what I try to let everyone know, and I try to do this in the most kind way possible. And I know I'm intense on this podcast, and I know that woman called me ignorant and what did she say? I said it at the beginning of the podcast, ignorant and arrogant. I try not to be ignorant and arrogant. I am so passionate about this because I want you to decide. It's your turn. I want this for you. I literally tell every person, your money is not going to change my life, but it 100% could change yours. Verbatim. So every single person who says, I need to think about it, that's fucking bullshit. And I mean that so kindly because you have been thinking about it. You've been thinking about it for fucking ever, probably. You've been thinking about it for a week, a month, a year, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. And don't get me wrong, this isn't ignorant and this isn't arrogant. I was in your exact same place. But now on the other side of it, I know the one thing that my money can't buy me is fucking time. It can buy me options, it can buy me ease, but it sure as fuck can't buy me time. I wish it could. I wish it could. But for every person who says I need to think about it, no, you don't need to think about it because all you've been doing is thinking about it. When anyone books a call with me, really that's like just the first action step they're taking. Now, if I'm not the right person, absolutely go somewhere else. But don't tell me you need to think about it because all you've been doing is thinking about it. This was the first action. And going back to what this whole podcast is kind of about, the self-trust, the only thing you probably don't have is the self-trust that it's going to work. Think about it. So there's a lot of women that says, I need to ask my husband. I get that. I would never want, and I've told clients this, do not lie. Do not lie. And if you're going to lie, do not fucking tell me because I don't lie to my husband. I don't lie. It's just not what I do. Do I exaggerate? My husband says I exaggerate. I do exaggerate. I'm an exaggerator for sure. But do not lie because hopefully, if you have communication with your spouse, you've probably been saying, I really want this to change. I really want to do this thing. I really want to XYZ. You've probably told your husband that 97 fucking times over the last however long. So when you then say, I have to ask my husband, chances are your husband knows you want the change because you've been telling him for however fucking long that you want something to change. So hopefully your husband goes, yeah, I know. I know you've been saying you want to do this thing for the last 2 years. So why would I tell you you shouldn't do it when really all you've told me is you want to do something different. So now you're actually taking the action to do something different. Here's the reason why. Because you don't trust yourself or you don't trust that the thing it's going to work this time because perhaps it didn't work one other time. But have you ever I don't even know, like your kid, I don't have kids, but when your kid falls down one time, you're gonna be like, well, fuck, he's never gonna walk, I guess. Guess the little fucker's never gonna learn how to walk. No, you're going to help him up and make him do it again. And it's the exact same thing. It may not work the first 2 or 3 times, but are you gonna get fucking closer to where you wanna be by trying? Absolutely. If you're just gonna sit on the floor and never try to walk again, guess what? You're never gonna learn how to walk. And that is what I want for everyone. I want you to literally be able to trust yourself and bet on yourself and know that if you want to do something that's so foreign to everyone else in your life, I want you to do it. I literally want you to do it. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? Go back to fucking exactly what you're doing. When I was on this discovery call with this guy, I was like, okay, cool. You've worked for this company for I don't know, 10 years. You make a couple $100,000 a year. So if this thing over here doesn't work out, are you going to lose every skill and every moment of time that you've ever had working for this company? Are these skills going to leave? Fuck no, they're not. Literally, if this doesn't work out, go back, go get another job. And I even asked him, I was like, okay, if this doesn't work, what are you going to do? Can you go back and get a sales job? He's like, probably tomorrow. I was like, bingo, that is 100% the truth. Bingo, go back to exactly where you were. And honestly, if you're young and you're listening to this, if you're under the age of 40 and you're listening to this, why the fuck not? Hopefully, fingers crossed, you got another 40 fucking years. go back and do whatever you were doing. Is it going to get that much worse? Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. But like, unless you try, you are literally going to get to the end of your life and go, oh, fuck, I wish I would have done that thing. I wish I would have learned how to bet on myself. I wish I would have learned how to trust myself. Like, you will not care about that money. You will not care about that money. You will not care about that money. Most people who are listening to this podcast, and I guess this is a very generalized statement, but most people probably have overinvested in a lot of things. Maybe their car, maybe their house, maybe their trips, maybe their jewelry, maybe their purses, maybe like upgrade the hardwood floor. I don't really know. But most of you, the vast majority of you listening to this podcast, have probably pissed money away on something that like you don't really give two fucks about. Like, we've all done it. I 100%, 150% have done it, probably still do it. But am I the person who knows that if I truly want something, I will say no to something that is like that instant validation that is never going to make me happier, to do something that I know my future self will thank me for, my happiness will thank me for. I know I say it on this podcast, the same thing about like the money stories where I'm like, money's so easy to make. You can make money. Like, I say this shit all the time. But you guys know, I always say I'm probably one of the happiest people you'll meet. Well, why is that? Because I'm fucking always willing to do whatever it takes to have the greatest life ever. Because I always say I have the greatest life ever. Again, I'm not being cocky. I'm not being arrogant. I just decide to believe that I have the greatest life ever. And my life may not be the same as your life. You may think my life is fucking horrible. And most people, if they really thought about it, because the internet makes you think that you're always, everyone's life is always better. Most people would probably not think that my life is that great. Why? Because A, I don't have kids. And I'd say what, 90% of people want kids. I don't know, maybe that's a high stat, but 80% of people want kids. So my life is not the best for your life. So don't be sitting there thinking I have the greatest life when you have the ability to choose your own greatest life. You decide what is the greatest life. You decide what you want. The only difference between perhaps where I'm at and perhaps where you're at or where you want to be is like, I fucking just decide it. I will fucking decide it every single solitary time. I will bet on myself. I will always delay this instant gratification bullshit. I will sell whatever I have to sell in order to appease like my highest self, to like, and now I'm at a point, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, forever, that I don't actually have to do that because I was willing to do that in the beginning. I was willing to do that at 30 to 38 years old or whatever it was. I was willing to do that every single time. And now, don't get me wrong, I've had clients. I had a woman work with me who was in her 70s who literally was like, I'm fucking doing this now. Who knows how many years on the planet I have left? But like, I am literally deciding on myself today because I've never decided on myself before. Oh my God, how fucking blessed am I that I got to work with someone like that? How amazing is that? And some of my youngest clients, I've had teenager clients. How cool are their parents, by the way, which I think is amazing. And also, too, the pressure on me of like, oh, feeling so like blessed by that. But like, I don't care how old you are. I don't care what demographic you're in. I don't care where you are in this world. If you literally want to have the greatest life ever, number one, you have to get clear on it. Number two, you have to go all in on it. And you have to decide that, like, does not fucking matter what anyone else says. You are going to invest in yourself, long term strategy, long term play to have and create the greatest life ever. And is it going to be uncomfortable? Yes. Is it going to be hard sometimes? Absolutely. But is it worth it? Yes. And so many people just think about this short term mentality. What is now? Well, I don't want to spend that money now, or I don't want to take that risk now, or I don't want to bet on myself now. Well, what the fuck are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? If you are listening to this podcast, chances are you are a person who has thought about it before. Now, the only thing now you have to do is take action to make a different choice. That's it. And not, one of the things that Ryan Serhant said, and he literally used this phrase. He's like, the future you will care more about what you do in this moment than what you don't do. And that's true. Like, it's so true. Like, bet on yourself. Try. What's the worst thing? This is actually like an exercise that I've done with clients that I don't do a ton, but like on discovery calls, I do it quite a bit. I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, it doesn't work. Worst case scenario, you invest all this money and you invest all this time. Will it A, get you closer to where you want to be, or B, take you further away from where you want to be? Most of the time, it's going to be A. And probably if anyone thinks it's B, they're never going to work with me, and nor do I want to work with them. But it's going to get you closer. That is the thing. Action, right? Small incremental actions. I don't know if you guys ever listened to the podcast I did with the founder of School of Hard Knocks. It was really good. It was a couple years ago, really young kid. I follow their account now. It's so good. They have close to like 1 million followers. Probably by the time this podcast comes out, they'll have like 1 million followers. It's a great account. They interview like really wealthy people, millionaires and billionaires, of how they did it, right? And I was watching this one video because I watch all their videos. I think they're super good. But I was watching this one video and he interviewed the guy who does the data, like the backup of the data for Google. And the guy said to him, what is the one thing that you think has made you successful? And he said that he built the skill of that he needed to be good at. Like, I guess something with data. I don't know shit. But anyway, he built that skill and he was constantly taking more actions than anyone else. And that's what put him ahead of everyone else. He did talk about some luck, but he was also betting on himself. He was taking those consistent actions. He was taking more actions than every one of his competitors. It is those small incremental actions over and over and over and over. That's who's going to win. The person who is willing to do those small things when everyone else does not want to do those small things. And I just hope that today's episode was helpful for you. I hope that there's one thing in your life that you're like, no, you know what? I'm doing short term. I'm betting this short term mentality on this. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I'm going to bet on myself in the long run. And the first time in my life, I'm going to do one thing that scares me to fucking death. That is probably not the quote unquote normal society thing to do. But guess what? If you guys really want to dive into it, and this is not political in any regards, but the people who literally want to keep you stuck and safe are the people who want you to have this like mediocre life. No one who has achieved greatness in this world has not bet on themselves. No one who has achieved greatness in this world has done what like the status quo is. No one. There is not one high performing athlete, not one billionaire. Those people are willing to bet on themselves. And you cannot be a person who watches other people do it if you want something. You have to take action and you have to build your confidence and you have to bet on yourself. You are not going to care about that money and that time today when you're older. You're not. You're going to care that you did the thing that you've always wanted to do. And I hope today's podcast resonated with you. I'm so grateful that you guys listened to the episode. If you know anyone who needs this episode, from the bottom of my heart, I don't care if you ever even tell me, but I would just so appreciate you copying this link and sending it to one human being that you know that might need it. And if you ever get excited and just feel like you just want to do it, I'd love a 5-star review or send me a text message and let me know that this one hit. And if you do want the podcast that I sent out that kind of spurred me to record today's episode, that Ryan Serhant podcast, all you have to do is send me a text message, 501-222-3362. Text me the word inspo or text me the word just text me a phrase that says Ryan Serhant podcast, whatever. I'm happy to send that to you guys. So grateful for you. Thank you for watching on YouTube. If you are, thank you for sharing. I'm just so grateful that you guys are here, and just take that action, bet on yourself, learn how to bet on yourself. I promise you, your future self will not regret it. I'll see you guys next time.